How good are you at spotting a fake ID? Probably not as good as you think. Bogus IDs are more sophisticated than ever, and experienced bouncers are having trouble telling fake IDs from real ones. Selling cannabis to minors can result in huge fines and even cost dispensaries their license. That's why Veriscan by IDscan.net protects their dispensary partners by performing more than 75 algorithmic checks on each ID's barcodes. So if your dispensary is worried about inadvertently selling cannabis to a minor, you should look into Veriscan by IDscan.net. They're offering listeners of this podcast free white glove setup. Just go to idscan.net to join over 1,000 North American dispensaries and 9 out of 10 of the largest MSOs who are competently bringing plant medicine to legal age consumers. If you already work in cannabis, then you know times are tough. So many talented professionals have lost their full-time gigs in the cannabis industry and are wondering what's next. If that's you or someone you care about, you'll be thrilled to hear that the wondering is over. Find out the latest cannabis industry job trends and which states are leading the pack in the 2023 Cannabis Jobs Report by Vankst. Vankst is the leading cannabis hiring platform, and they're providing this report to the cannabis industry for free. So head over to Vankst.com to access your copy of the newly released 21-page 2023 Cannabis Jobs Report. And while you're there, sign up to find the perfect job or the perfect hire today. That's Vankst.com.
It's a Friday afternoon. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and this is Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled business of cannabis talk show that we do every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. And I am so glad again to have a full house of guests right up until 6 o'clock when we will be running our weekly Weed Talk News show. And unfortunately, Elena Pinto is on vacation, so if you are going to watch that news show, you have to suffer with me. Joining me as my guest host this Friday afternoon and many Friday afternoons, Josh Kincaid from Washington State, Doug Miller from New Jersey, and since this is the third Friday of the month, Morgan Fox joins us from Normal in Washington, D.C. Guys, thank you all for coming. I want to go right to Morgan and talk a little bit about what's going on in Washington, D.C., and if you can explain why the District of Columbia continues to have to deal with the United States government regarding their own cannabis laws.
Well, this is actually a long history regarding cannabis and it being stymied by Congress. Going back all the way to the 90s when district residents overwhelmingly approved a ballot initiative to allow for medical cannabis. This was almost immediately halted by Congress because since the district is not a state, Congress has basic control over its entire budget for the most part and can prevent it from expending resources on a number of things. So immediately, a congressional rider went into effect that stopped the district from being able to implement its medical cannabis program for more than 10 years. Interestingly enough, the author of the original rider to prevent that, then Congressman Bob Barr, after retiring, had a complete about face and then became a staunch supporter of medical cannabis. In fact, oftentimes working with groups like Marijuana Policy Project and others in order to help overturn prohibition. Interesting that these changes of heart tend to happen after people are out of office or retired. Fast forward in 2014, district residents once again voiced overwhelming support for making cannabis legal for adults. This was able to go into effect because it did not actually require the use of any resources in order to implement it. However, almost immediately, Representative Andy Harris from Maryland instituted or attempted to and was successful in instituting a rider that prevented the DC government from actually regulating adult use cannabis sales. And this rider is still in place to this day. So DC has been in a situation where cannabis is legal for adults outside of its robust medical system, which has dispensaries and has compliance testing and whatnot. There haven't been any legal adult use sales. And because Congress continues to institute this rider, it makes it very difficult for the city to be able to regulate the system. And what we've seen is the development of a huge unregulated but very professional market for adult use sales. And the city government is not interested in enforcing prohibition against these groups. So what they've been doing is trying to find workarounds in order to bring them into the fold and make them regulated, but in a way that does not destroy the existing medical system. And so, there have been a lot of different ways that they've tried to do that, such as allowing patients to self-certify, expanding the patient condition list to any condition for which a physician feels is appropriate. And very recently, passing emergency measures to help license some of these existing gray market businesses and make sure that they're in compliance with all of the other things involving a standard business, just not necessarily a cannabis license. But there are efforts underway to do that as well and license them as medical cannabis businesses. Greatly expand the license cap on the existing medical stores to allow for more room for all of these businesses that already exist. Very recently, in addition to that, any law that the city council passes and that is signed by the mayor has to go through congressional review for 30 days. And what happened most recently is that a bill that the city council had passed to help expedite expungement and relief for people convicted of marijuana charges within the district going back for quite a few years are going to begin to be moving a little bit faster and make it a lot easier for the people that actually want to get them. Congress did not interfere with that. And so when the 30 days was up earlier this week, it became law. So now district residents who have a charge or conviction are going to find it much easier to be able to expunge that.
All right, that's good news. All right, that is good news. There was some bad news, and I'm not sure which one. I think Doug and Josh both are going to fight over who wants to ask him about the bank failures and the subsequent impact on the cannabis industry. Josh, I'm going to point to you, Josh, and let you handle that, and then Doug, you can handle the stock market reaction. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, can I ask a follow-up question about DC?
Sure.
Because what I heard was in order to get anything done, they have to go through the mayor, and then the mayor goes to Congress. Is that right? Versus somewhere like Puerto Rico, who also doesn't have congressional representation. So how does it work for the people to get something done?
Well, DC is treated a little bit differently than territories are. But basically, city council has to approve something, and then the mayor can sign it. Or not, and then city council can override if they need to, and then it has to go for congressional review for 30 days. In addition, every year when the appropriations process happens in Congress, the committees in charge of overseeing the district's functioning in Congress can add all sorts of riders and restrictions on what the district is allowed to spend money on. And by spending money, that even means a city employee sending an email to somebody. Okay. So there are several layers of control that Congress has over the district. And, very recently we saw a situation where city council overrode the mayor and sent a bill for review in Congress that would drastically overhaul the district's criminal justice system. That was not supported by Republicans. A number of Democrats opposed it as well. And President Biden actually signed the disapproval measure against it, effectively killing that reform that city council was able to pass with flying colors. So that's really indicative that, despite the fact that, the president is in favor of some forms of cannabis policy reform and is in favor of criminal justice reform generally, he is willing to override the rights of the residents of the District of Columbia. That's also why the president included the Harris rider that prevents DC from effectively regulating adult use cannabis in the budget that he sent to Congress.
So basically, real quick, John, I'm sorry. So basically, you're saying in Washington, D.C., the people really don't even have a choice of what they want, because at the end of the day, it has to go through a mayor, then council, and then Congress, which good luck trying to get it through there. They'll never have adult use if that's how it works.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that we don't have any senators here and we only have one delegate in the House makes it very hard for district residents to actually have a voice in federal government. It's a really unfair system.
It's almost like they don't exist in the country, but yet they're still part of the state. So that's kind of wild. I never knew that's how it operated there. Thanks for that insight.
All right. So who's going to ask the banking question, guys? Come on.
I'll kick it off because I think it's interesting with COVID that happened over the last 3 years and how that really killed a lot of bills in Washington, where it's a Class C felony to maintain and operate a cannabis lounge. Do you see this Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse and everything in between as potentially killing reform for banking?
No, not at all. I think it's more of a delay issue because it's going to keep the Senate Financial Services Committee very busy for at least the foreseeable future. And this is one of those things that keeps happening again and again in Congress because cannabis is still a relatively low priority issue for most members of Congress. And there are so many things happening outside of cannabis that demand the attention of lawmakers at a much higher level. Oftentimes, cannabis issues get pushed to the side. It's not necessarily that it's setting them back, but rather it's just delaying them. They get backburnered.
And with that said, and going into the stocks and SVB collapsing, do you think Congress will basically like bail out the banking industry? So wouldn't you think it would be, if they bail them out, that the cannabis industry would have a strong foot to get into banking federally because of all the cash flow that it could actually help the banks with? So it's like the Congress wants to kind of help the banks out, but at the same time, a way to really help them out and help the cannabis industry is federally legalize cannabis and allow us to use the banking system, because it'll explode cash into the system like they've never seen before. Do you think that would ever happen because of the situation right now?
I mean, I don't know if it would explode cash into the scene when you're comparing it with, global industries, but, to be cynical about it, I think that there's a lot more members of Congress who have investments in a lot of these banks than who have investments in the cannabis industry.
Yeah,
Josh
is
follow the
smiling.
money
He gets
trail.
it. Yeah. All right. There was another thing that happened this week down in D.C., and it has to do with hemp-derived CBD, Morgan. A representative, Morgan Griffith, Republican from Virginia, and Angie Craig, Democrat from Minnesota, introduced two bills that would require the FDA to be regulating hemp-derived cannabidiol, which is CBD, and basically establish regulations for CBD as a food and beverage additive. Any shot at this passing?
It's tough to tell. Honestly, I think that that issue might actually be dealt with in the Farm Bill before any sort of standalone, narrowly tailored legislation is able to pass. I think it really depends on time. Really, I mean, I think that one of the big factors that I'm really concerned about for any sort of cannabis or cannabinoid legislation is being able to make space and time on the congressional schedule. And this goes back to the thing I was talking about, where there are lots of things happening outside of cannabis that are taking time away in what is really a very short legislative window with very few number of days to actually get business done. And that can present serious problems.
Can I throw in a rip at the government then? Because they're more concerned. They're more concerned about keeping their place in Congress than they are dealing and representing the people that put them there. And there's so many issues that cannabis is right in the middle of. But are we at least encouraged that perhaps some regulations of CBD may actually happen 5 years after the Farm Bill passed, Morgan?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that if it requires FDA action, it's going to require an act of Congress to give them a steady timeline, because if left to their own devices, the FDA has shown time and again that it is willing to punt on this issue. But going back to what you said before, I think that there are two sides to that coin. The fact that I think a lot of members of Congress are realizing that it's going to be very difficult for them to get anything done legislatively during this session because of the fact that, we've got a bicameral divide by party, and then each very narrow majorities in each chamber. means that it's going to be largely deadlock, I think, for most of this session. And cannabis policy reform is something that I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle are starting to realize is a not particularly controversial issue when you look at voter support. It's something where they can show the American people that they can reach across the aisle and work together to actually accomplish laws that do benefit people's lives.
That would be refreshing. It would be refreshing. I want to see more of that. I just don't know if it's going to happen. I'm not confident. And as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of the two-party system either. Everybody has so much money in politics instead of money going to things that can help people that need it the most. And right now, the whole country is dealing with this runaway inflation. They haven't quite moved the Fed hasn't moved the interest level at all because they're afraid of what happened with the two banks this week. Doug, you've told me that you think, forget recession, you're going right into a depression. And bank failure is part of that.
We're in a recession now. We hit a recession in August of 2022. They wanted to change a definition. You can't change definitions, and you don't change the charts. And I mean, I'm telling you, it's going to run because what happened, they're going to print more cash. Everything's going to take a run right back to the top real quick and then forget it. I mean, what they just did is setting up for failure and a disaster, and it's going to happen. I pretty much have called everything for the last 5-6 years on the dot, and it's just setting up to be wild. I mean, I keep saying it's something we're never going to see. Nobody's ever been alive is going to see what's going to happen in our financial system, and they have no idea. They're just lolly-dollying around. We have literally an absent administration. When you have something this serious going on, you have to step in and figure it out. Like, you need solutions fast. And there's nothing going on. I mean, it's just emptiness, and it scares me. I'm not going to lie, because I look at these charts every day. I pinpoint them, and I really, really go crazy about it. And it drives me nuts because you can literally see what's going to happen, and it's scary. I'm telling you.
I don't, Josh, how do you feel about the whole scene in with Doug pointing fingers at the administration, which, by the way, is exactly what the administration is there for, to be blamed for everything. I don't care if it's Democrat or a Republican. That's, everybody points the finger at the administration. And I'm not quite sure that any leader right now could do anything with what's going on in Congress. Josh?
Well, I think they are. They just haven't told us about it yet. It's kind of like the movie's being made, but they haven't released the trailer. The central bank digital coin story is going to come out. It's in the making. They're going to launch it next year. 2024 is coming. So in the meantime, let them eat cake, breads and circuses. So that's the positive side as well. I'll be distracted and entertained in the meantime.
Hey, Morgan, do you have anything to add with that, more? Because you're right in the middle of it. I mean, is the government functioning right now?
I mean, as much as government has ever functioned. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to weigh in on what should be done about the bank issue.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. That the bank issue kind of reflects what happens in the stock market. Everybody gets all freaked out about it. I mean, there was actually a lot of media talk about It's a Wonderful Life and the scene in that movie with the bank run. I mean, that's kind of scary when you look at what was done in black and white film decades ago, repeating itself in modern times. I was a little freaked by that analogy. But
who was crowding up the counters to get their money back? It wasn't average people. It was VC capitalists.
I saw people in lines out in California wanting to make sure that the FDIC was going to step in with their under 250,000. You're guaranteed for that in your bank if you have that in the bank. And I did see people lining up, but no, it wasn't as dramatic as the movie, because after all, the movie was fictional. But it sometimes does reflect on what is going on in our times at this point in Washington, D.C.
Considering most people don't necessarily know where their next meal is coming from or have less than a couple $100 in the bank, I think a little bit of uncertainty among the people that have significantly more than that might be a healthy thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to, I'm going along for the ride on this because I don't matter. Anyway, I do want to ask Morgan, we being the cannabis industry, lost a tremendous figure this week in science and research from Israel named Raphael Mechoulam. And a little bit later on the show, we'll talk with Dr. Marion McNabb, who is was friends with Dr. Mechoulam, Professor Mechoulam. What is the reaction? Was there any reaction at all in the cannabis circles in the lobby world down in Washington, D.C. to losing Raphael Mechoulam this week?
I mean, certainly in the advocacy world, there was. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody who's been in this field for more than a handful of years who hasn't, been touched by his work or met him or seen him, give speeches in various places. The guy was just a powerhouse and a true pioneer doing research on cannabis at a time when it was legally very dangerous to do so. Him leading the way and really exhibiting quite a bit of bravery to do this research that nobody else wanted to do and that people did not want him to do, I think really paved the way for a lot of other cannabinoid scientists out there and really provided a lot of information that was helpful both for individual consumers, but also for advocates to be able to point to and say, look, this is a misunderstood plant and the things that you're telling people about it are patently false.
Right. And that was the nice thing about this when a great man passes away, and he was 92, the obits come up with the stories about the person and give you a little better feel for what it took, what kind of risks this guy took in the 60s when he tried to bring in hash into his country to study. And needless to say, it kind of got a little attention back in the 60s, but he believed in it. He wanted to find out what was going on inside this plant. And if you know anything at all about cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system, this is the guy that was the first one in to look at it all. And certainly a fascinating life, celebrated now that he is gone. Morgan, any last thoughts?
Well, can't think of anything. Just remember, everybody, keep contacting your lawmakers and tell them to prioritize cannabis policy reform. We know that there are a lot of other issues that they have to deal with, but this is one that's important to the American people and one that is relatively low-hanging fruit where there's a lot of room for agreement.
Yeah, there you go. That's Morgan Fox from our friends down in Washington, D.C. and the National Organization of Reform of Marijuana Laws. Morgan, thank you for joining us again and being as consistent as you are every third Friday of the month, even sometimes when we forget that it's the third Friday of the month. So appreciate your promptness and joining us on the show.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so we are at 4:20 on a Friday afternoon, and I don't want to be in this chair any more than anybody out there who's watching it. Anyway, that's the way I feel. We are going to take a break. We are going to open up to a interesting dynamic that happened here in New England, and it has to do with the fact that we had a dispensary fail, went into receivership, and now there's all sorts of ways. A precedent, I believe, has been set now, and we'll talk to the folks up in Maine at the Opus Consulting Group with Jacques Santucci when we come back from our regular Friday afternoon 4:20 break. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
I'm Joyce Gerber, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast, The Canna Mom Show. And we are on a mission to enhance the impact women have on this industry as business professionals, healthcare providers, policy advocates, caregivers, moms, by sharing and preserving their stories of love and kindness, wisdom, and hope. I am so grateful to have found my tribe of Canna podcasters right here on PodConX, and look forward to our work of crushing the stigma around cannabis and caregivers and building this new industry together.